You're listening to the Getting Social podcast, where we get social on entrepreneurship and everything that comes with it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Getting Social podcast. I am your host, Jeff Policard, and today we talk about sports. Sports are about competition. Better yet, sports are about knocking out your competition. You see what I did there? You see that? But in reality, sports are much more than just competition. It's about teamwork, hard work, dedication, sacrifice. It's about all kinds of people getting together to compete on one end. And on the other end, all kinds of people getting together to socialize and enjoy the game. But sports is also about marketing. In this episode of the Getting Social podcast, we get to pick the brain of Kenny Pordon, the former XFL League Marketing Director. We talk about sports and marketing, of course, but Kenny also shares his journey with us from assistant sports manager to Commissioner Award Nominee for Innovation in the NFL to Emmy Award Nominated Producer for the NFL Rush Zone, leading to his role as the Marketing Director for the XFL. Ready, set, hut!
All right, Kenny, let's jump right into it. But first, I want to thank you once again for accepting my invitation to be a guest on the Getting Social podcast. This is going to be a fun episode. If you're a sports fan, you do not want to miss this one. That's for sure. And for someone with a resume as extensive as yours, Kenny, I got to ask you about your journey from assistant sports manager to the marketing director of the XFL. So take us back and please share this journey with us.
Sure. No, it's been a crazy ride for really probably about the last 15 years or so. So I started, or more than that. So I started at WFUV in 2003 when I was in school. I went to Fordham University for undergrad, and I was very fortunate that they had a public radio station that was 50,000 watts in New York City that had a pretty vibrant sports and news department and even music department with students that contributed to all three. But predominantly, sports and news was mostly run by students, and we both kind of went into our own executive producers. There was one on the news side and one on the sports side. So I was lucky to work on the sports side and do everything from a live talk radio show that would go 3 hours on the weekends and be able to do a lot of that in the summer, but also during the year, do color commentary for Fordham basketball and Fordham football, and be able through, the one-on-one program, which was our live talk show, to cover things like the NFL draft or, the Baseball Hall of Fame, and be able to do live broadcasts from those events. So really, truly an amazing experience. But not only that, be able to do, live broadcasts from Yankee Stadium as well during Old Timers Day. So just really had an ability to get experience at a very young age that there are a lot of people in the industry don't have the same ability to do. So also was able, as part of that experience, to cover, the Mets, the Giants, the Mets, and the Devils, and really look at it to be very fortunate that I was able to have that opportunity because it really gave me a chance to see the other side of sports, really from a sports business angle, and communicating a lot with public relations officials and other people that were team personnel. So when I got towards the end of my tenure at WFUV, I thought, I don't want to really continue to be in broadcasting. I really think I want to be on the other side of kind of the business and being more on the kind of management side. And that's where I had a little bit of experience, as you mentioned, being assistant sports manager and sports manager at WFUV, because I was really working with the executive producer on, where we were going to put certain talent on certain broadcasts that we were managing and how we were going to manage the station overall as far as the sports department. So that was a really great opportunity for me. And naturally, when I was looking to find my role outside of school, I was looking at, can I make the transition to communications and public relations? So what I did to find my first job really in sports outside of college was I emailed anybody in sports that worked at a team or league within 6 hours in New York. And also during that time period, I was fortunate that the NFL was having a public relations meeting in Philadelphia, and they were asking, basically students that were about to graduate their senior year, to attend in Philadelphia and be part of kind of an open session to meet public relations professionals from all 32 teams, but also people from the league office as well. So with that, I was able to hand my resume out to various individuals through that as well. And I remember, riding back and calling my parents and being like, "There's no way I'm going to get a job at the NFL. It's super competitive. It's it's a huge long shot for me to expect this to happen." And I kid you not, within 5 days later, they gave me an email saying, "Hey, we'll be coming for an interview for a temp of public relations position within that department."
Oh, awesome.
And luckily I got the interview, and slightly after that, I got the job, and that's where I started my career with the NFL. So it gives you kind of a little bit of a background on how I at least got from WFUV to that first role at the NFL.
Oh man, I love those stories because, here you are thinking that you don't have that much of a shot of getting a job here, and you simply hand out your resume, you take a shot, and you get your interview, and then you nail it, and then you get it. And that's how it's done. So congrats on that.
I was very fortunate to learn from some really accomplished professionals at the NFL and within the sports industry. So someone like Joe Brown, who had literally worked, at the NFL since the first Super Bowl, was someone that I learned under when I started. Greg Aiello also worked in the public relations department for the Dallas Cowboys, and then came over and ran the NFL's PR department for a long time at the league, I think over 2 decades. And Brian McCarthy, who's still there now, and you'll see him a lot as a spokesperson for various issues around the leagues, is still in the public relations department, and I learned underneath him as well. So to learn under those 3 individuals really gave me an understanding of the NFL way and how the NFL does things. And it was a great department to start my career because I always had that foundation. And I always felt appreciative to have the foundation because I truly had an appreciation for where the NFL had come from its beginnings and where it was heading. So I kind of, it was a great place to start. From there, I was hoping to find a full-time position in PR. It just wasn't in the cards. So in speaking with Greg, he's like, "Hey, there's nothing for you here in PR, but there's this new junior rotational program starting that's for people like you that are starting out your career, and I think it's something you should consider." So I went to, basically a meeting that they were having to discuss the program, and really liked what I heard. And I thought it was a great opportunity for me to kind of flex out and learn more about the NFL overall. I don't think what I really encapsulated in that meeting was it was going to be my business school. So I was very, very fortunate in that mostly my, when I studied undergrad was communications and public relations. So I really had no business knowledge. So with that, I was able to learn that through the junior rotational program, predominantly in digital media and marketing, and putting it together as digital marketing, which is clearly where marketing has gone over the last 10 years and will continue to get more sophisticated in the digital sense. So, to build up my business career and foundation through rotations and things like entertainment marketing and international affiliate sales, digital media, and fan strategy really gave me a good basis of the future of sports marketing, but also indication of where the NFL was heading, and definitely helped lead me to my next role. So the junior rotational program was hugely influential for my whole career, and the ability to report into 6 different managers was really amazing in a young part of your career to really get an understanding of various different management styles and ways that people do things. I really think that those 3.5 years, I was able to accelerate my career dramatically during that time period.
Interesting, man. And from there, because you spoke about digital marketing evolving into what it is today, and also your transition into fan strategy and marketing there also. And I want to know a little bit more about that, because I'm a fan of sports, and I want to know how big of a role, for example, marketing plays into me being a fan. I'm all about the competition. I'm all about the drive and determination from those amazing athletes that are putting in the work day in and day out. But also there's, marketing always plays a major role in basically the types of sports that you decide to watch, the types of movies that you decide to watch, the types of books that you decide to read. So in terms of your experience with marketing and sports marketing specifically, what were some of the strategies that you guys developed in order to increase, fan participation and development and all of that?
It's a really good question, and one that we would, consistently battle with, each and every day. So the NFL, when I had started in the marketing strategy and fan development group, was really kind of focused on two areas. One being youth, which was roughly 6 to 12, and another being the emerging Hispanic fan base as well. So those were really the two places that we were focused on. And the reason was that the NFL really, we thought everywhere else 18 plus was doing phenomenally. There really, wasn't a lot we needed to do from a marketing sense because naturally what happened is through the family, people became fans over various different generations. So if you're an Eagles household, you're going to watch the Eagles every Sunday. If you're a Giants household, you're going to watch the Giants every Sunday. And a lot of the marketing work was done, somewhere you mentioned like movies does this as well, by word of mouth, by, the communities that were built in those markets, but also in those households to really make people fans of the sport. It's something that the NFL has an advantage on over all other sports, is that it kind of owns a day of the week. And it's really the only sport that can say that, maybe other than college football with Saturday, but football really owns weekends in the fall. So, when you go to NFL markets, Sunday is key, and it's a great time for families to congregate and get together in the fall. And naturally the weather in where the NFL, is strongest, or traditionally has been strongest, in the Northeast and Midwest, if you look at the upbringing of the league, the weather's not great. So, people, when they congregate during those time periods, really would sit down and watch NFL games. And a lot of the fandom descended from that. So we knew that if you got a fan to be a fan before the age of 12, they were likely to be a lifelong fan. And that's true for any sport. So we really put a lot of focus on getting fans those touch points and that engagement. And a lot of it was obviously working with best in class. So we worked with Disney, we worked with Nickelodeon. We were really trying to format those relationships, because if some kids didn't have NFL fandom passed down to the family, we thought, well, let's partner with the best in class to at least give them exposure to the brand and have them come in that way. So those are some of the augmentation that we did with the NFL, is working with partners in the space that we thought could add a lot of value. When Dawn Hudson came in as CMO, and I believe this was roughly about 2014, but I might be off a little bit on the dates, but roughly about 6 years ago, she did a research study with our research team, say, hey, let's reassess the fan base 5 to 95. Let's see where we're at, because we had never done that before. And we actually found out there were some cracks in the 18 to 34-year-old fan base that we didn't think were there. And naturally, we wanted to focus on making sure that fan base was as strong as previous generations, and make sure that they were, watching at the NFL at a certain fervor. So we had something called avid fans. We wanted to make sure that the avidity level stayed high. And what we were noticing is in those fan base, that part of the fan base, the avidity was slipping, meaning that if you watch 5 games a week, you were watching 4, 3, et cetera, down the list. There was just less consumption of NFL games. So that was something that part of our team focused on, and the other part of our team, continued to focus on youth. So towards the back end of my tenure at the NFL, we found out that 85% of those who play football are likely to be lifelong fans. So we went in very heavily with a participation strategy. You see the same thing with junior NBA, the same thing with play ball. And I think the reason why all these leagues are very, very focused on participation is, like I said, it's a great future indicator of fandom, and naturally will increase the lifetime value of a particular fan. So that's why, youth sports is really being focused on by the leagues, because it's seen as a future revenue driver. And that's really what we saw as far as what we were looking at the NFL. So really the back 3 years of my tenure was focused on growing the Play Football initiative along with our youth and high school football team, and making sure we were trying to get as many kids to play youth football as possible, because we thought that naturally would lead into football fandom, whether it be college football or NFL. And naturally, if you're a fan of college, you eventually find the NFL down the line. So that's why we wanted to put a lot of resources there to support, play football, and naturally lead into more fandom for the NFL.
A lot of things caught my attention here, but first question I have, based on what you just said, is that you noticed that there were cracks within the age group of 18 and 34 in terms of their participation as fans. Could you share with us what some of the strategies that you developed to fix that issue?
Yeah, and it's something you're seeing across the board. It's not novel to the NFL. The NBA is going through a bit of it in MLB. NBA's probably done a little bit better with 18 to 34-year-olds as far as engagement, but a lot of that's been social engagement. As far as games and ratings, you're starting to see some slippage in NBA and MLB. We'll see how the NFL does, but the NFL has obviously, had two very strong years in the ratings. And obviously this is a little bit of a peculiar year with everything going on. But, for the most part, sports 18 to 34 is just not as strong as it used to be because a lot of kids growing up didn't play youth sports in the same clip as people like my age. Youth sports has basically become a little bit more, how can I put this, involved. And by that, I mean, there's more traveling teams. There's more youth sports that are expecting more time of kids than before. The idea that you could play, 3 rec sports and really get a taste of all 3 and be able to, understand the intricacies of each sport from playing it is going by the wayside. You're seeing specialization, what they call sports specialization, at a lot earlier stage, even in high school. High school, the idea of the 3-sport athlete is something that's dying a bit. And you're seeing a lot of sports specialization in high school, but you're starting to see that younger and younger ages. And especially in sports like baseball and basketball with things like, AAU and obviously baseball with the various traveling leagues and tournaments that you could really play year long. And even with football, I mean, a lot of football programs, don't want athletes or student athletes being able to play other sports. They really want them in the weight room during the off season to train for the upcoming football season. So with that, naturally, it's caused a little bit of erosion in fandom where, you might be only playing one sport. So you might be a huge football fan, but you might not care at all about the NBA or MLB and vice versa, right? So I think you're seeing a bit of that go on. I also think when you look at the media landscape, it's more involved than ever before. There's more items really going for your attention than ever before for younger generations. So, we're talking about things like YouTube and Instagram, obviously with, video providers or cable and satellite, there's more channels to watch than ever before. There's obviously the internet, which, naturally is going to grab a lot of attention. So, when I was, 18 years old, there was, basically cable television and the internet, and internet was, you're sitting on a desktop, right? Now with mobile devices and iPads and, you just have so much information and entertainment at your fingertips that naturally sports is going to take less of your time share. And I think, that's why it's imperative for sports properties today. And we were really focused on this in our fan development team of like, how do you make that 3 hours as impactful as possible? How do you make the sport as impactful as possible? How do you make sure every time you see an NFL broadcast, it's a FOMO moment, it's a can't miss moment? And, that's something that's really hard because naturally, a lot of television providers, as you've seen with the pandemic, they want sports programming because it rates really well. So they're going to throw a lot of dollars at sports programming. But if you have, NFL games on 3 nights a week, if you have football on 5 nights a week, if you count college football, naturally people are going to value those windows less and probably going to tune in at less of a clip. So that's kind of what we're seeing. We're seeing the same thing now, I think, with the pandemic, with the NBA and MLB and NHL. I mean, you have 4 games on a day. So you're not going to get as many people tuning into certain windows that they might have, in the past because, they're just saturated with a ton of content. So they're going to kind of dip in and out, and they're really going to follow the sports through their mobile device. So we said at the NFL, what we called this type of fandom was something called transactional fandom, meaning like I'm going to check the scores. I might bet on a few games. I might be engaged with fantasy sports. But the idea that I'm going to sit down and watch my team for 3 hours and be emotionally invested in those games is something that's going a bit by the wayside. And that definitely concerns people in the sports industry because emotional connection is what makes you buy merchandise. It's what makes you, spend the money you're going to spend on going to, a live sporting event. And you're starting to see younger demographics doing a little less of both. And really that 35 plus demo is really, providing a lot of the revenue when it comes to things like the 2 things I mentioned, which is live event attendance and obviously consumer products.
We have so much content available to us. Like I go through my Netflix and I don't even know what to pick. I spend almost more time looking for something than actually watching something. And on the internet, the social media, there's so many things, so many distractions, so much clutter that it's very difficult for you to focus on anything. I'm going to use the NBA as an example because NBA first for me. So I fell in love with the game when I started watching Michael Jordan in the 80s and 90s. when I knew that this pandemic was for real was that night I was watching a game actually, and then it was postponed because of the pandemic. And I was like, man, this is not real. And that's when I really thought, okay, this is real. And then almost 5 months later, the NBA starts again. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait. I'm going to watch every single game. I'm going to be so involved. I'm going to enjoy this because I've been missing it for so long. And it hasn't been the case. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed a lot. Like I could watch, I would say half a game, 3/4 of a game if I'm lucky. But it's hard for me to sit through the entire game without being distracted by something else. So that leads me to my next question in terms of challenges, even though you might have answered some of those already. But if there's one that really stands out in terms of your challenges in marketing to not only the 18 to 34-year-old bracket, but also the 6 to 12-year-olds, because I think that's super smart, obviously, is just planting the seeds right then and there, and they become fans when they're grown. But if there was one super challenge that you could share with us, what would that be?
Yeah, I think you really hit on it, Jeff. And I think, from what the sports industry is dealing with now, and you mentioned it really well in the pandemic, I think you're just seeing oversaturation of sports. Like, naturally, we're not used to in the summertime to have this many options between NHL, MLB, and NBA. And I think there's a lot of pent-up demand. But, like I said before, there's 4 NBA windows on a day. Same thing with the NHL. So, you're going to dabble in and out. And the summer is a time where people, they tend to, it's just baseball on and there's not a lot of sports, and, your people are out doing things and are going on vacation. I still think those things are happening even during the pandemic. I think people are just, taking those trips a lot closer to home, and might be going on excursions that are a little bit more similar to what you see in the fall when kids are in school, and maybe you'll go for that day trip or that drive on a Sunday afternoon or what have you. And I think that's happening now, in the summer. So, the main thing I've always said as far as driving, individual fandom, is all about emotional connection. And that's why I think it's so key for fans to really feel connected with their individual teams. And I think that's something like sports talk radio did a great job when I was growing up. It's always finding a way to connect you to your local teams. And I think what's happened now is that, it used to be a big deal when you had, cable TV. You might have had 35, 40 channels. And one of the biggest things to watch would have been that, in the New York market where I am, is like that Yankees or Mets game. And you would look forward to it all day. And naturally, there wasn't as much sports that was on TV, or there'd be an NFL game, and it would only be on Sunday and Monday. So you would be looking forward all week to that game. I don't think there's any time to build up anticipation. To your point, like, things are just moving so quickly. There's so much to consume that anticipation and that longing isn't quite there. So I think you've seen it in sports. Like, everyone was, because there was not sports for such a long period of time, those initial games got a ton of attention, both the NBA and MLB, high ratings. Same thing with the PGA Tour, NASCAR, what have you. Whatever sport first came back, huge interest. And then I think it's just gone into the daily cadence of where we've been heading with a lot of sports, where, like, people are like, okay, great, it's back now. And it just becomes part of, not noise, but it becomes part of the overall content experience that you're having. So, unless you have a real interest in watching a particular game, like, you might not be tuning in for as long. And naturally that, the ratings are going to go down. So I think what you're seeing in the sports industry is, the fan number is probably still the same. The avidity is what's going up and down. And the avidity is clearly what drives some decent amount of revenue on the television side, because you're making revenue based on TV ratings. You're naturally, based on television ratings and based on interest in the sport, you're going to be able to make those sponsorship deals and other things of that sort. So, I always feel like you need to make sure, and we would always say this at the NFL as well, you need to make people prioritize the NFL, is what we were saying, or prioritize your sport. So I always believe the way to do that is really to make it feel more special. And I think we're kind of in a market now where, putting a little bit more behind a paywall, putting a little bit more behind a league pass and a Sunday ticket and other things might be a smart thing to do, because then you're limiting your total broadcast windows that are available to the general public. And if people really are avid fans of a sport, you're kind of getting another revenue channel within that. So I think what we're seeing now is with, video providers, they're just looking to find as much valuable programming as they can that's going to drive a ratings number. I think when we get to more digital measurement, a mass rating number is not going to matter as much. It's not going to matter that X amount of people tune into a sporting event. It's going to matter on how engaged they in that sporting event. Like a great example is YouTube. YouTube's whole algorithm is based on the amount of time you watch YouTube. So it's based on how long you're on the platform. If you're only watching, let's say, an NFL or NBA game for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you're still counted in the Nielsen ratings. So, from that standpoint, once television becomes more digital, what's going to be more interesting to advertisers is going to be how engaged is this audience rather than how big this audience is. So that's where I think that we're heading as a business, and it's going to matter that you're creating a compelling product, because you're not going to want people who are transactionally having experience with your brand. You're going to want them emotionally invested. So I do feel a lot of team marketing and a lot of driving a relationship between communities and teams is going to be important for sports in the future. So it's going to be fascinating to see how digital measurement of television really impacts the industry, because as you see now, the reason why the NBA, NHL, and MLB are playing in completely empty stadiums and arenas is because of television. If there wasn't any money to be made in television, we wouldn't even be having any sports right now. Every sport would have canceled itself. So I think that the measurement of television in the next few years is going to be very, very telling on where the future of the sports industry is. And I got to look a little bit under the hood when I worked at CBS Interactive and CBSN, of really understanding what the future of digital measurement can provide for television.
You mentioned the Nielsen ratings, and when I found out how it was measured, I knew, and obviously I think, and anybody in the industry knows how skewed it is. So I can only imagine now, like obviously with, different methods of measuring viewership, how more accurate ad costs are going to be, and overall interest in developing shows and leagues and sports events and all that stuff. Looking forward to that. Those are great points, because on YouTube, like you said, the entire algorithm is based on viewership and your habits and how long you watch a video and what kind of videos are you watching. And that's where the future is headed, with AI and all that kind of stuff. But now you also mentioned the empty stadiums, which to me, I thought, like initially I was like, man, how is this going to work? This is so much of that energy, so much of the thrill of watching an NFL game or a basketball game is about that environment that you're in those stadiums. And that is not going to happen. At least, I don't know for how long, 3, 4, 5 months, 6 months, who knows, a year, nobody knows. But I'm surprised, pleasantly surprised, as to how the NBA, for example, has adapted to that new era that we're getting into right now. Not only does it feel like a real game, they've added fan noise, they've added even like holograms, and I've heard that you can pay to have your hologram be there at a game, which I think is super brilliant. And I'm also anticipating virtual reality attendance, where you might even get a better experience from your living room in virtual reality. You could get courtside seats in virtual reality and all that kind of stuff. Do you see this being an alternative to attending games live in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point you mentioned on sort of virtual reality overall. I think the NBA has done, some work with NextVR, which was acquired by Apple, and had things like their finals and certain playoff games, featured there. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that provides, potentially an additional revenue stream for leagues. Obviously, as you mentioned, whether it be baseball with the cardboard cutouts or the NBA with the virtual reality fans in their venue, the ability to be shown at a game when you're not at a game also provides another, revenue opportunity as well. Like, who says that you can't be on the scoreboard in kind of a Zoom fashion, or similar to what the NBA does, every game. Like, there could just be a video board that just randomly has digital, fans in attendance, and might be able to add another texture or layer to games when things come back. So, obviously, one of the greatest ways to drive innovation and creativity is through constraints and restrictions. And the sports industry has been through an immense amount of them over the past few months. So I think you're going to see a lot of innovative concepts come to the forefront overall that really provides additional revenue opportunities for these leagues. And like I said, I just don't know if the idea of going out and doing billion-dollar sports rights packages with the ESPNs and the Fox Sports of the world is going to exist in the way we always expected it to exist over the next 5 to 10 years. And I think, what you're seeing with a lot of these, individual media companies is more going towards a subscription model in SVOD, whether it be, CBS All Access or Disney Plus, which clearly is, really had very, very impressive numbers. Obviously, ESPN is continuing to grow from the ESPN Plus standpoint. So a lot of these huge media companies, and obviously with Peacock just releasing in July, a lot of these companies are going with an SVOD model. So I think you're going to see kind of a combination of what's called AVOD and SVOD. AVOD is completely free television that's through things like Pluto TV and Xumo, and they're probably going to get a little bit more sports content as well. And then you're going to have SVOD, which is going to be your subscription packages. So that will be your MLB TV, your NHL TV, your NBA League Pass, your NFL Sunday Ticket. But there'll also be free content that these leagues will provide as well. And I think there will be a balance of both that will come through. So my guess is that what you're seeing right now, which is kind of your anywhere from $50 to $90 cable packages, probably will kind of erode over the next 5 to 10 years, and you're probably going to see a lot more customization regarding what an individual watches. Not saying that the Spectrums of the world and Comcast of the world won't still be players in that. They think will be similar to what you've seen with Amazon and Apple TV and others. I just think that the way people are used to having a kind of a multi-channel cable package might change slightly, especially when it comes to sports, which tend to be the most expensive content out there. I think there's going to be certain content that will be delivered outside of a paywall, and more that will go behind kind of a subscription paywall, especially when you look at some more of the long season sports like the NBA, NHL, and MLB. I definitely think that could be the future, where you look at something like a Yes Network or an SNY or MSG. There's a possibility that those networks are able to be bought for $10 a month, and people can add them to to maybe a base broadcast package similar to what you've seen with like the HBOs and Showtimes and Stars of the world.
That's interesting. I'm pretty sure that's where it's going to have to be headed to. So we'll just, I guess, sit and watch and see what happens. From the NFL, you transition into the XFL as the marketing director. And I'm curious to see if you're able to share with us some of the differences between the two leagues, the approach maybe in marketing. Did you take some of the things that you learned in your experience? Because you spent a good 11 years in the NFL. And how did you use that experience from the NFL to transition over to the XFL? And we know that now it's been bought by The Rock. And I am curious to see what's going to happen in the future. But what can you share with us in terms of what you learned from the NFL and transitioning into the XFL?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question overall. And I think, it's very different from being at the preeminent league in all of sports to being at a startup league that's looking to get up and running in 150 days from when I started work there. So I literally started the first day of fall last year in late September, and we were opening up our season for the XFL on February 8th. So naturally, not a lot of time in between. And the immense amount of work it is to create a football league from the ground up. Like, I don't know if people even in the industry or definitely fans have a real true appreciation of what it takes. Like, I mean, there was nights, I'm getting to the office at 8 a.m. and being there to midnight and taking a 90-minute commute back to New York City. So, it was a lot of commitment from a lot of people to really make this happen. There was a lot of days that you open up your computer at 7 a.m. and then you're closing it down at midnight, getting 6 hours of rest and doing it all again. So, it was that type of commitment to make it work. And not saying that people, aren't committed at places like the NFL or NBA or NHL, but with the NFL, you have more of a defined role. You're in an established framework of an organization that's been around for over 100 years. And kind of what your role is, and you're there to kind of maximize your role. So there, when I was at the NFL was you are in charge of really driving fan development for youth. So that was kind of myself and my boss's role within the company is really be focused there on those things. So it's a very granular focus. In the XFL, your focus can change on an hourly basis, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. So I tell people all the time, like 1 week at the XFL felt like a month at like the NFL. So, and it's something, like I said, it's not a knock against the NFL at all. Like they do phenomenal work across the board. It's just the nature of how much needed to get done. And everything rides on you. Like we literally had to get 10,000 creative assets built. And it was, senior vice president of marketing, myself as marketing director, creative director, and 2 full-time designers. And that was our task. So it was extraordinarily challenging and really difficult. And we just didn't have a lot of people that were, on the team. So naturally, we continued to hire closer and closer to February and got more and more people. And naturally, our workload diminished slightly. But with that, there was more and more that needed to get done. Like I always tell people, like, when we look at the end of the year in 2019, I'm leaving the office at the XFL at 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. We're going to get back to the city in time for the ball to drop. And we left without having any of our field walls that you saw on TV done. So all the XFL branding you saw on television, none of that was done. None of that was 100% completed. So that just kind of gives you an indication of how much work needed to get done for a startup league like the XFL. And whether it be things like Drone Racing League or Premier Cross League or any of these other outfits that have started in the last couple of years, like totally understand what they're going through as well. It's just really, really difficult to get a league, off the ground and running. And I wish The Rock and Redbird Capital all the best with the XFL and the 3.0 version. I was thrilled to see it, come back and be acquired. And hopefully they can, come back in a safe manner and in a manner that makes sense for the longevity of the league. And number one, I was happiest to the fans. Like we put a lot of effort to really bring football to a fan base that we felt like wasn't able to have the best experience with the game, which is a live event experience. If you're looking at an NFL ticket, a lot of markets it's $100 to $150, and naturally that's where big time professional sports is heading. But if you're a football fan and you're maybe of a working class or middle class background, like that's a really aggressive price point to justify. So being able to go to a New York Guardian game, for instance, for a season ticket of 5 games for $125 or $25 a game, we really thought we were bringing a new fan closer to the game of football and really driving, like I said before, deeper avidity with the game of football and providing more football to avid fans who naturally, when Super Bowl ends, is they're really kind of going withdrawal until the draft happens in late April. And we thought that the XFL was the perfect complement to really fill football fans' time in between the Super Bowl and the NFL draft. And then after the NFL draft, teams head to mini camp and training camp and preseason and the regular season. So there really would have been no time where there wasn't at least some sort of football activity happening throughout the calendar.
That's what I noticed also, that the calendar started right after, or right, I guess, in the midst of the Super Bowl. So to extend the season a little bit. So that's smart, obviously. And I also found out that the XFL stood for, or stands for, extra fun. What does it stand for again? I forgot.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. The XFL really, what we thought was an advantage for us is that's all it's called. There's nothing that designates those letters. So naturally, people think the F is for football and the L is for league, because that's what the NFL stands for. That's also what the Canadian Football League stands for. So yes, the F and L is a nod to Football League. But the X is really, I always said the X is the variable, right? So it's the variable where we've said, hey, fans can do whatever they want with that X. And that was part of what we were looking at. And we never kind of went forward with it, but we're like, it can mean extra. It can mean experience. It can mean anything that a fan really wants to designate it to is the XFL. And that, we also almost looked at the X as being kind of that fan variable, that player variable, that variable for the front office. And that's why when we had our brand message of for the love of football, to me, that was always kind of what the X was about too. So it was, for people who love the game, to let them to put their own expression of the game out there, whether it be fans in markets like St. Louis, LA, Tampa, all of our 8 markets, being able to put their own stamp on what it was to be a football fan, an XFL fan in those individual markets, whether it be front office, executives like myself, as far as what the XFL meant for their individual career and what they were trying to accomplish through this individual journey of taking the leap of faith and joining the XFL, or what it meant for the players, like, guys like PJ Walker, who were able to, be able to leverage and experience with the Houston Roughnecks now to be, potentially the backup quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. And who knows, eventually maybe a starting quarterback in the NFL. So, it was really, the X was kind of that variable for anybody involved with the XFL of whatever they wanted to make it. And I think that was something really special about the league.
The ultimate variable, so that's awesome. And I guess I read some stuff on Google, so I guess people were making stuff up, but I love that about this, man. This makes it even more interesting. And actually, I had a question about For the Love of Football. Who came up with that? Because even though it's super, I guess, basic and easy, and it's not like, and anything extraordinary when you look at those combinations of words, but the meaning behind it and even having it on the field is, to me, extraordinary, because I think that's the power of marketing, and it's almost like a true definition of what this league is about specifically. It's because we love football so much that when the NFL is done, or when college football is done, the NFL is done, now we have something else because we want more and more and more football for the love of football. And do you know who came up with that slogan?
Yeah, no, and this is also, in reports that have been written about the league. So nothing I'm divulging is kind of away from that. But yeah, For the Love of Football was really the reason why Vince McMahon started the league. He really loved the game, and that's why he started the XFL in 2001, and why he wanted to bring it back in 2020, because he always felt like in 2001 that he just wanted another go of it. He loves the game so much. He enjoys watching it, and, at the NFL level in college and other places, and really wanted to, provide more football to fans, and really for the love of the game. And I think that's really why we always say was sort of it started probably as more of an internal rallying cry for all of us. And then we decided, no, this is public facing. Like, this is also why, to your point, I think you really encapsulated well the sentiment. Is why fans are watching more football in February and April. They wouldn't be watching it if they didn't love it. Like, nothing against the NFL or college football, but you might not love the game. You might not have a deep passion for the game, and you could still watch a few games. Like, you could still do something with, NBA or MLB or any sport, right? But if you're going to be watching, something like the NBA G League or the XFL or something that minor league baseball, if you're going to be watching multiple levels of a sport, you have a love for it. You have a love for the game. So we were saying, hey, it really is encapsulated in the XFL, because the only people really watching the XFL are people that love football. So why don't we really lean on that and say, hey, the reason we're producing this league is for the fans. That was really the whole reason why Vince was doing this. There was nothing that he needed to do this from like a financial perspective. He was doing great at WWE. WWE is an amazing accomplishment, an amazing story and success story of American business that Vince McMahon has helped shepherd and lead really for the past 40, 50 years. So from that standpoint, he really didn't have anything else to prove to people on how talented he is in the business world. He really was doing this because he loved the game, and he wanted to find an avenue to share his love of the game with others. So naturally, people like me in the front office, the reason why I go from the NFL to the XFL with a stop at CBS in between. And the reason why I left CBS Interactive is I love football. I wanted to get back into, and be part of a professional football league. The reason why, players wanted to play in the XFL is they wanted to play. They might be on practice squads. They might have been, have a chance to, stay at the NFL at that capacity, but they wanted to play games. They wanted to go out there and participate and compete. And that's why they're doing it. And the reason why fans are spending tickets, to go to the New York Guardians and LA Wildcat games and Tampa Bay Vipers games is they love the game too. They want to go and experience it in person. They might, normally be only able to experience the NFL, through television, but they want to have that live, in-person experience. So everyone that was involved in the XFL was doing it, for the love of football. And even, Jeffrey Pollock who's the president of the XFL, was very big on embracing that slogan, and really thought it encapsulated everything that we were doing. And even in selling, the XFL to the Rock and Redbird Capital, The Rock even said, "Hey, I'm doing this for the love of football." So naturally, that line is continuing to work its way through the XFL in the 3.0 version, and I think will always be part of the ethos of the league and why people get involved in the XFL overall, and hopefully why people get involved in the future.
And like you said it, you also left CBS to join the XFL for the love of football because you missed it. So that's an amazing story, man. And I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for your time. This was awesome, like I predicted. And I learned a lot today, man. I didn't know all that, especially in the marketing, how deep, you guys took this. And again, thank you for your time, your participation, and for being so kind and also so flexible in time and all that. So thank you so much for that. If you have any last words, anything in the future that you are planning on doing, you want to share with us?
Yeah, no, Jeff, and do appreciate the time and being able to provide my perspectives and thought leadership within the sports space. And I think the one thing that I'll leave the audience with, I've mentioned this a lot during the podcast, is sports is about emotion. It's about wanting to be a part of something bigger than yourself. And I think for everybody that works in the industry, you never can forget that. That is why people get involved in sports. That's why, hordes of people congregate. And, music definitely has a similar capacity. There's other entertainment forms that have a similar capacity of bringing together people and unifying people. But there's nothing like watching a team complete a positive play in a game and potentially even a game-winning play and seeing the eruption of the crowd. I'll always remember I was covering the Mets in college, and I was there for the Endy Chavez game. And, basically it was a high fly ball, hit out into the outfield. And Endy Chavez just extends his hand against the wall and I still don't know how he made the catch. I have no concept how he did it. But when Shea Stadium erupted, I remember going next to my colleague. I'm like, I don't know if this stadium's going to stand after this, because it's like the elation of the Mets fans in seeing that moment. It was like nothing I've ever felt in my life. And I think that's the power of sports. And as long as people in the industry understand that that's what matters, nothing could derail sports. I think that is going to be really the test for executives within the industry to understand sports is about those magical moments, and it's about bringing as many people together through those magical moments. And as long as that becomes the central purpose for why people do what they do in the industry, then it's going to be fine. If that ever gets lost, then sports is going to diminish as far as something that's really impactful and important, within American society. So I think that's, kind of the thought I want to leave your audience with of, why I'm involved in the industry, why I care about it so deeply, and why a lot of my colleagues do as well, is those little moments that just make life a little bit brighter. And I think during the time period that we're living in now, sports and the desire to eventually get back into full stadiums is so important, because people want to feel that sense of connection. And unfortunately, that has been something that, this horrible virus is taken away from a lot of us, is that ability to come together in moments of that nature.
Beautiful, man. And I know I am with you 100%. The power of sports, the power of the spirit of competition. It's amazing, man. And once again, thank you. And I had an awesome time.
Sounds good, Jeff. I wish you the very best with the podcast. And thank you so much for having me on as a guest.
Thanks again, man. We'll be in touch.
Thank you for listening to the Getting Social podcast. If you know a friend that would benefit from this episode, please share it. And remember to subscribe and review.